Hey, welcome to Hell in the Hallway with your host, Billy. Got a question for you. Are you in a holding pattern? What? I know. What is a holding pattern? I didn't even bother explaining it. Let's start there. Let's talk about first what a holding pattern even happens to be. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about aviation today. A holding pattern is a route that can be flown by an aircraft that typically is this over formation in the sky, right? And allows that flight to stay in that particular formation without leaving the area. Now, this type of flight pattern is usually used when the aircraft has reached a destination, but it can't land. And there's a number of reasons why it can't land, right? Maybe poor conditions on the ground, too much traffic on the strip. For airplanes, they continue to circle that airport in that shape until they receive clearance to land. See, their flight plan has been interrupted. It has been delayed. Has your life plan been delayed? Has it been disrupted? What's causing a holding pattern with planes? We're going to actually talk about three things. One, an emergency at the airport keeps an aircraft from landing. That makes sense, right? Maybe number two, equipment that is not working on that plane that keeps that airplane from landing. Or three, which is the most common, is weather. See, it keeps the pilot from wanting or being able to proceed to land. Now again, I know you're not here for a lesson on flight patterns, but it is connected and it's really important and it's connected to us in a really big way. Because are you in a holding pattern in your life? Like this coronavirus that we're in, this crisis we're in, it's keeping us in a holding pattern. We're not quite sure what to do. We're not quite sure what's going on. We're going moment by moment. We have to recognize if our holding patterns is it a pattern to itself? Does it have a plan? Is there a process connected to it? We don't even really know, especially as it pertains to this current virus we're in. But as far as our lives, holding patterns, to be honest with you, is the essence of the title of my podcast. I know I didn't adequately explain why I named it Hell in the Hallway. Hell in the Hallway is about being stuck in your life. It's about being stuck in the hallway of change. Sometimes change for the better, sometimes transition, sometimes change for the worse. And oftentimes we are stuck because we fear opening the door to the next thing. Or maybe we're shoved out of one door. We're too frightened to open up another door. Therefore, we sit in the hallway of our lives. And that is hell, being stuck. I've been stuck. I'm very much aware of what that feels like. So let's connect holding patterns of the planes with the holding pattern of our lives now. So there's an emergency at the airport, right? And now the airport cannot land. Oftentimes in our lives, we may have a crisis that happens in our home or with our families that allows for us to be stuck for a little bit, right? We can't move, we can't gain clearance. Therefore, we're in a holding pattern. Maybe we've had a death, maybe a trauma, some other significant disruptions, and we just can't move forward. We can't gain clearance to land the plane of our life into the potential of what it's supposed to be because we can only focus what is happening on the ground. And keep in mind, sometimes this means we're looking at airports that are not ours. We're looking at airports that is somewhere else. We can't even land at the new because we're still listening to the controller of an airport we've already left. Woo! Maybe it's number two. Maybe our holding patterns is connected to equipment, right? Equipment outage that permits the aircraft from actually landing, that there are parts of us that we think is damaged, right? That we have the perception or that maybe is broken. And we're either conscious of this brokenness or it's unconscious because that's quite possible. And we don't have awareness. And so we can't really understand why we cannot land. We cannot understand why we can't gain clearance because we can't give ourselves permission to do so. Why? See, we are stuck in a holding pattern at that point. We can't even get into the holding patterns of our behaviors, right? Because I know there's sometimes when there was cyclical behaviors, we find ourselves doing the same things, saying the same things, meeting the same people, right? We get caught up with the same stuff. traumas of our past, poor messaging from our upbringing, or those we expose ourselves to do, lead us to believe or allow us to internalize these things as our truth, and keeps us from gaining clearance and landing our planes in the next destination of our lives. Weather, number 3, was the most common reason for a holding pattern. And that's the same in our lives, right? So as far as the aircrafts, thunders, blizzards, storms, they keep the plane from being able to see the landing strip, or reduces the confidence of the pilot that they can believe that they can actually land that plane safely. How often in our lives do the storms keep us from having the confidence to land? What are we being blinded by? Is it fear? See, the storms always seem larger than our capacity to navigate it. We actually sometimes forget that storms will just pass us, but we stay in a holding pattern because we lose the ability to see the gift in the storm. And so we maintain a holding pattern, never landing in the next destination of our lives. One more thing about aviation stuff, and I know you're like, come on now. Let's talk about EFCs. That's expected further clearance. What does that mean? That is information that is given to the pilot, to the aircraft, that has been given those holding instructions. It tells them when there's a safe time they can reasonably expect to land. They can exit that holding pattern and they can proceed to the destination and they can land that plane safely. Who gives that information? The air traffic controller, the ATCs. Now, what's their role? Their role is to help guide the planes both in the sky and on the ground. They see the traffic in all the areas. That's their responsibility. That's a huge responsibility. They have to coordinate that traffic to ensure that each plane takes off and each plane lands and it passes safely through the sky without running into other planes. Air traffic controllers communicate with their pilots. They're connected. They tell them when to take off and when to land, and they alert them to pending issues that's on the ground and that's in the sky. Why is that important, my friends? Who is your ATC? Who's your air traffic controller? Who do you listen to? Who has your ear? Because it really does matter. When we are paralyzed by the storms in our lives, who are we listening to help us guide the way to navigate the storm? Who's doing that? See, we cannot always control the storm, but by God, we can control who our ATC is. See, the ATC in your life should be able to have access and see things from a perspective that's all about your growth and development, even when you're not in a good place. See, if we only see the storm from our perspective, we see something that is larger and much more dangerous than it actually happens to be. Someone who is so truly supportive of you, who is designed to help you develop or grow, for me, it's my spiritual role. That is so important for me. It reminds me that the storm is temporary and actually reminds me of who actually controls the storm. That storm will not take me out. It has purpose and it has process in the plan. What about the equipment that's on the plane? It's damaged. What about our equipment? Sometimes is that damage is conscious and unconscious. So that makes sense if there's a holding pattern, right? Well, keep in mind that just because there's an explanation for it doesn't mean there's a justification for it to stay. Behavior can be explained, but it doesn't make it right. So if we are stuck and we see that we're stuck and we're not aware of why, it's imperative that we have someone from the outside reach in to help find the damage. And if it can't be excavated, it should be repurposed to make it work for us. Who is your ATC? Lastly, the emergency that is at the airport that's causing that holding pattern. Let's begin to understand that the emergency is happening at your airport. Or is it happening elsewhere, right? And we're stuck in somebody else's holding pattern. So we can't move forward because they're not moving forward. Or maybe it's an ATC at an airport that you used to be at, that you're no longer there, and you're listening to old flight plans, listening to information that no longer applies to the destination you are going to. Now you can't even gain clearance because you don't have the right information. See, friends, when we attempt to leave the old version of ourselves and reach for new versions of ourselves, sometimes old habits and fears can reach up and have us use wrong information, wrong flight plan. Who is your ATC, my friends? Who's keeping you in the holding pattern because you are operating on an old flight plan? What is that ATC telling you? This is important. See, friends, we don't have to be stuck. We can find ourselves from time to time in holding patterns. That's normal, right? Every now and then we get a little stuck. We have some awareness. We have the right ATC, the air traffic controller, and we find ourselves out. That makes sense. We first have to figure out which one is it. Is it damage? Is it the airport? Is it the storm? Which one is it? Maybe it's a combination of all three. How do you get out? How do you gain clearance? Maybe it's a combination of your spiritual world, supportive friends and family, groups, self-help books, and I'm always going to support counseling. The ATC in your life is never meant to crash your plane or to keep you in some holding pattern the rest of your life. It is designed for you to land in the next destination of your life. Remember, friends, it is not just about the destination. It is also about revelation.